Hey everyone, it's me, Rami Marks, your Tangled Yogi out here in Northern California. Welcome to the Flux Deluxe class. I'm so excited to bring this to you. I'm going to be teaching it to the Napa Public Library tomorrow, and I wanted to share it with you as well. So let's talk about the things that we're going to need for class. I'm going to be working with a Micron PN pen, the Signo Uniball gel pen. This is the Angelic. I also have my trusty mechanical graphite pencil, but you can use any graphite pencil you want. I'm going to be working with the Genesis tile at the Tangled Yogi shop. You can go and check them out there. I love the Genesis tile because it has a very smooth surface and is wonderful for working with color pencils. Now, if you don't have the Genesis tile, you can always make a square on cardstock that's 4.5 by 4.5, and we'll get ready to rock and roll. So with that said, let's get started with Flux Deluxe. So many of you know that I like to do a little breathing exercise before we get started with our tangling. So let's go ahead and let our feet touch down onto the floor. Press your sitting bones into the chair that you're sitting in. Allow your hands to rest in your lap. Let your spine grow comfortably tall. And if you feel okay with it, allow your eyes to close for a moment. Taking a moment to scan through the body and notice any places where you might be holding tension. Soften in your jaw. Relax in the shoulders and the arms, through the wrists and the fingers. Letting go through the chest, the belly, the hips, the thighs, the knees, the calves, the ankles, and the feet. Turning your attention to your breath here and noticing your inhalation and your exhalation. On the inhalation, notice the expansion of the body, and on the exhalation, notice the release. Breathing in, breathing out. And let's play with the breath just a little bit. Breathing in to the count of 4. Holding the breath in for 4. And exhaling the breath out for the count of 8. Breathing in for 4. Hold the breath in for 4. And exhaling to the count of 8. Last time, in for 4. Hold for 4. And exhaling to 8. And then letting your breath return to its natural pace and just noticing if the breath is a little fuller and a little easier. Scanning through the body and noticing if you soften just a little bit. And in your own timing now, wiggling in the fingertips and the toes, and gently blinking the eyes open and getting ready to create. So let's get started. I've got in my hand my graphite pencil that I'm going to be using for class today, and you can use any graphite pencil that you want. This is going to be so that we can start to build our border on our piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by putting a dot in each corner, just like so. And then I'll go ahead and start by creating a little border here for us to work with. So you can see that now I've got my border, and my lines aren't perfect. Remember, this is Zentangle. We're looking for the human experience, not perfection here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and look at my piece, and I'm going to determine where I think the middle is on each line here. And you're going to see me just go ahead and make a line that's going to divide the space. Now, once I have that, I'm going to go ahead again and I'm going to just make a nice aura fairly close to that line. And I'll do it on the other side as well. We're going to keep this pretty narrow so that we've got, I would say, about a half an inch in between, so that when we look at our string is the column in the center, and then we have these two boxes on the side. So go ahead and do that part, and then when we come back, we're going to build just a little bit more. So I've gone ahead and I've made my lines a little bit darker so that they're more visible on the screen. I noticed that they were a little bit light. So once I have this, right, you can see that I've got my I've got my main column in the center, my two columns on the side. I'm going to go right back into that central column here, and I'm going to go ahead and add what we call a very narrow aura right here and right here. So you can see now I've got these two narrow auras on either side of the piece. And I'm going to go ahead and cap off the top of that and cap off the bottom of that. And I'm still working with my pencil here so that it makes things a lot easier. Now you can see that I still have that line that's going down the center. I'm just going to take that away with my eraser. That's just a guide to help us build our string. So what we have here is, in the Zentangle practice, divided the space essentially so that we can start creating. So go ahead and finish up yours, and then when we come back, we're going to grab our pencils and have some fun. Okay, so let's start with our first tangle here. We're going to be doing the central channel here, this really nice little column. And we're going to learn a tangle called Shatik. For those of you who have been doing Zentangle for a while, you know this tangle. But for those who are just joining us for the first time, I'm going to do a quick demonstration of Shatik here. Shatik is a really nice tangle to do if you want to bring a really beautiful Art Deco kind of feel to a piece. And what it is it's a series of curves. So I'm just going to go ahead and start by creating 3 curved lines, and then I'm going to go again and start to build off of that. So what this is going to look like is I'm going to go ahead and just start to go in the opposite direction with 3 or 4 curved lines. I'll come back in and go in the opposite direction, and then I'll do it again. And it makes just a gorgeous pattern, but when this pattern is shaded, it is stunning. It's one of my favorites. And I'll just let this guy kind of float off the page there. So you get the idea. This is Shatik. So let's take Shatik and bring it into our central channel here. You can see I've got my micron pen in my hand here, and I'm just going to start by doing a really nice curve that's going to meet the corner, and I'm just going to do 3 lines. I'll come over here and I'm just going to go over to this corner, and I'll do 3 or 4 lines, just depending on where we land. I'm going to come up a little bit, go to the corner, 1, 2, and 3. Come up a little bit, go to the corner, 1, 2, and 3. Coming up and over, 1, 2, 3. Up and over, and once again, just getting into the groove of it. And then I'll just let this start to flow right off the page here, just to make it look like it's continuing. And isn't that beautiful? Just by doing those 3 lines and creating something so interesting right down the center. Okay, you go ahead and finish up yours. I'm going to finish up mine. And when we come back, we're going to learn a new tangle. Okay, so I'm going to grab a scratch piece of paper here, and we're going to learn a new tangle that I love to do. This is one of my favorite tangles. This is called In a Flux. In a Flux. And basically what it looks like is, let's go ahead and zoom in on this here for you. And the tangle flux is just an upside down teardrop. Okay, now in a flux is a flux inside of a flux. So basically what it looks like is you make a flux that's rather narrow, and then you arc off the side of it, and then you make these arcs that go up the side of the teardrop, and then one that comes upside down. And it makes this really beautiful, almost like a foxglove kind of flower. Now for our class, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little circle on the inside, and I'm going to puddle it in. Now you could do many different tangles on the inside of this and it would be really interesting, but what I'm trying to get towards is a more graphic kind of feel with this flower, something that's just going to catch your eye and pop right off the page. Okay, so isn't that so pretty just by doing those little arcs? So what we're going to do for our class is we're going to start with In a Flux, but we're going to use a little bit of a gemstone or a half of a gemstone to build it. So what it's going to look like is we're going to have an In a Flux that kind of pops out to the side, and then one that's going to start to arc over, and then one that's going to start to arc over a little bit more. Now you'll notice I'm going to turn my tile here. I'm going to do another one that arcs, and then finally I'm going to do another one that kind of pops down and over. Let's kind of clean that up so that when you see it, it looks like petals falling over the top of an arc, which is really beautiful. So let's go ahead and take a look at our page here. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out just a little bit so you can see where I am. And we're going to build a little bit of a string for this. So go ahead and pick up your graphite pencil, and we're just going to come to where we think the center is on our piece and just make a line with our graphite pencil. And I really want to stress that we're using our pencil for this. I'm going to turn this on its side here, and I'm going to just make a half moon going right through where that line is. I'm using that line as a guide. And then I'll go ahead and I'll do another arc coming right through here. Now because for a lot of you this is your first time doing In a Flux, I thought maybe we would do it with pencil first and then go ahead and ink it in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in right here on the corner, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw a teardrop that looks like it's just popping off the side here. Now once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to come up and over and back to center. I'm going to turn my tile just a little bit to make it easy for my hand, and I'm going to do another one that's starting to arc out towards the right. I'm going to go again, creating another one, arcing over to the right, and then finally I'm going to do one more, and it's just going to fall right off the page, so that it looks like you have this flower that's just kind of floating over. Really beautiful. So once you have that, we can start to ink in our In a Flux. So you can play with this as much as you want. I'm not looking for perfection here. What I'm looking for is something that's got a little bit of movement to it. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to start by getting right in there and putting my flux inside, and I'm going to arc off and arc off. Another arc on either side, another one, and let that pop in. I'll come into the next one and do the same. Arcing off. Coming in, just turning. Putting it in. Turning my tile. And I'm going to go one more time. This one's going to kind of fall right off the page there. So you can see that it's got this really nice movement, which is kind of floating over. So I'm going to go ahead and come in right in here, and I'm going to go ahead and puddle. And then I'm also going to do the outside of my teardrop because it's still in pencil. So you go ahead and do yours. I'm going to finish these up too. And then when we come back, we're going to add a little bit more definition right around that little gemstone. Have fun. So let's focus in on the center of this flower here. I'm going to go ahead and ink mine in here so you can see that I'm going to come to that first curve, and then I'll go to the second curve and define it here. Now I'm going to add just some lines in here just to give it a little bit of interest. Just like so. Now we're going to do a tangle that I have only just learned not long ago, and I really love this tangle. It has a combination of Rixty, which is a really fun tangle from headquarters, and another tangle called Veruca. So I'm going to go ahead and just come in right in where we were working and just do a stem. So I've got my stem here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a triangle-like shape that goes right over the stem, and I'm going to puddle it in. And now I'm going to do an aura. So this is the beginning of Rixty, which is such a fun tangle. But now, once I have that, I'm going to use the idea of another tangle called Veruca. And so what it's going to look like is we're going to come in and do a narrow petal, and then we're going to let these petals get smaller and smaller and smaller as they come down on either side. And isn't that such a cool looking flower? So it's a combination of two different tangles together. So let's go ahead and start to add those into the piece here. I'm going to zoom out. Whoops, let's get that to zoom out for me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by creating one of those wild little flowers right here. So I'm going to come right through these two little petals here, and I'm going to create my stem. And now I'm going to do the triangle over the stem, and I'm going to puddle it in. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put my aura line around it to create that nice triangular like shape. And I'm going to go ahead now and add those really cool petals. And you can see with each one it's getting smaller and smaller. And I'm also, just lifting up my pen and working around the petals that I have. And isn't that such a cool looking flower? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another one right over here. So I'm just going to go ahead and add it right into the space here. I'm going to do a little triangle. I'll go ahead and do the aura around the triangle here. And now I'm going to go ahead and add that really unique petal-like shape. Now you'll notice that I'm going to have to pick up and put down around some of these other petals. I love the idea of underlap and overlap. There's just something very satisfying about it. Isn't that so beautiful? I just love the feeling of these. Now if you want to add another one, you could add another one. I like to work in threes, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add another one right over here. I'll put in my triangle. Coming in, and then I'm going to go ahead and add those really cool petals. And that's got a really nice feel to it. I'm going to be adding some different flowers on the other side here, and so I want you to just feel free to leave a little bit of space over there. Okay? All right, have fun with these, and I'll see you in a minute. Okay, so we're going to play just a little bit. We're going to learn a new tangle, and this is called Javik. And it's by Rhea Matthewson, and I just love her tangles. They have such a fun whimsy to it. And Javik looks like this. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to come up and over, creating what looks to be like a little bit of a swirl. And then we're going to come back out and create a little bit of an aura here. And let's see if I can zoom in on this a little bit for you. And then off the back side of Javik, we're going to do a little petal-like shape, and we're going to grow off of the back of the petal. So see how they're all connecting to each other? So we're just kind of building this really fun, connected flower. Isn't that beautiful? So that's called Javik. And so let's go ahead and plug Javik into this really fun tangle that we're doing over here. So I'm going to start, you can see I've got this kind of valley in here, and I'm going to start pretty small with this, and I'm going to come up and out, and I'm going to do that little swirl, and then I'm going to come back out creating the stem. And then I'm going to start to create the petals coming off of the back side of it. So there's one petal, and another, and another. And it just has such a nice whimsy to it, doesn't it? Let's go ahead and grow one out a little bit taller, because it's always neat to have different sizes of Zentangles in here. And you're going to see that I'm going to break the border a little bit. So I'm just going to come in and start to break that border. Super fun. And then I'll do another one coming out of this little valley right here. And I like the idea of keeping them flowing in the same direction. So once again, those little petals just popping off of each other. And you're going to see that I'm going to kind of pick up and put down a little bit. But look at how beautifully that starts to fill in the space. It's just got a real nice whimsy, lots of flow of energy in there. So go ahead and do yours. I'm going to finish up mine, and then when we come back, we're going to start to work on the other side of this piece. Okay, so we're going to learn a tangle called Betweed, and Betweed looks like a braid in a lot of ways. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on this here, and the concept is that you're going to come down from the corner and go in. So you can see I've just started this nice arc that's going to go down into a corner. Now I'm going to come from the other side and I'm going to come to the center point right there. I'm going to go back over here. Now the desire is probably to want to go to the center point, but we're not. We're going to go over to the center point of this line, and it creates that really nice braid. I'm going to come up over here and do it again, coming over and coming to the center of that opposite line, over here, the center of the opposite line, here, and then here. Now a lot of the time when you see Betweed, people tend to put a little bit of a weight line in there, so you could go in and round off the tip, and it just kind of gives it this really elegant kind of feel to it. It's a beautiful border if you ever want to use it in a border, but today we're actually going to be using it in a really non-traditional way. So you can see that that's got a really nice feel to it. So that's Betweed. Now what we're going to be doing with Betweed, I'm going to do a fairly large rectangle here so that you can see what I'm up to. So I've got this nice large rectangle, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide the space by putting in a line here, a line here, and a line here. And you'll notice that my lines are not connecting. We've got some separation here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to build a wave. And you're going to see me come up away from the bottom about 3/4 of an inch, and I'm going to create a wave that goes up and over just like so. And then I'm going to come up and over and out just like so. So see how this looks like a wave? And you can see that I'm equidistant to the bottom in all of these sides. Can everybody see that? Hopefully you can. So now once you have that shape, what we're going to do is we're going to come from the corner here and we're going to connect to this point and to this point. We'll come over here and we're going to connect to this point and to this point. So we already have the beginnings of our star here. Now I'll go a little bit more narrow, and you can already see the element of Betweed starting to show up, so it's not equidistant anymore. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side, and I'm going to do the same thing on this side. So we've got more of the same thing going on. Now remember that idea of not going and joining down here, but joining in here? I'm going to do an aura that comes out and an aura that comes out. I'll do the same thing on the opposite side, and you'll see that they're going to join up a little bit. See how this line looks like it could go continuously through? And then I'll come down. Now I'm going to do one more of this with an aura and another one of this with an aura. And then I'll come over here and do an aura, and over here and do an aura. And you get that beautiful looking star-like shape. Super fun, really, really neat to play with. So let's go ahead and start to add that into our piece here. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on that rectangle that we have up at the top. And just like what we just did, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a line. I'm going to do another line that's going to come down nice and close, but notice how there's a space in between here. And then I'm going to do another one right here. Oops, that one has a little bit of a wave to it. It's okay. It'll be just fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by creating those waves. So you can see that I'm going to come up, because this rectangle is a little bit smaller, I'm going to come up about a half an inch, and I'm going to create a wave right here, and I'm going to create another wave right there, and then I'm going to fall off the page and fall off the page. Now, once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to come down from the corner, and you can see I'm still using my pencil here. This is a little bit more complicated of a tangle, and I want to just give you the freedom to start over again if you want to. But you know, there's no mistakes really in Zentangle. You can play as much as you want. So you can see I'm just going from my corners and coming down. Now this one I don't have a point to join to, so I'm making up a point. So you can see I've got those points and I've got those points. Now we're going to come into the center here, and we're not going to connect anywhere except for off center. So you can see I'm just going to dive down and connect and dive down and connect. I'm going to turn my tile, and I'm going to do the same thing off of this corner, but I kind of want it to meet up, so I'm thinking about it right there. I'm going to turn my tile, and I'm going to do that again on the other side. So I'm looking at this line right here. I'm going to put a little dot there because I want it to look like it's connecting, and let it go right there. Now I'm going to add some auras. So here I go. There's one aura and another aura. We'll do it again on the opposite side. One aura and then another aura. I'm going to come back to the center. I'm going to create an aura here and an aura there. And we'll do one more right over here. One, and then I'll turn, and two. Now, one of the reasons why I love working with pencil is because I can come back in and reteach myself the whole idea all over again. So I'm going to just pick up my pen, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to redo my lines here in pen. So if you had a wiggle or a wobble in your line that you were unhappy with, you can always make it a little bit straighter on this go. It just gives you a chance to have almost like a dress rehearsal, as it were. So I'm just going to go ahead and go 1, and then I'm going to go 2, 3, and 4. So I know where I'm going now. I can kind of get into the zen of it, as it were. I'm going to come in, and I'm going to touch, and I'm going to come in, and I'm going to touch. I'll do the same thing on the opposite side, taking my time. Now I'm coming to the center, creating that nice elongated line there. Going over to the side and doing the same. Just the way we did it in the first time. Coming back to center, and now we're going to do our auras on the side. So here we go, aura, and then here's the other aura, and then here's the idea of where Betweed came from, where we're getting this kind of woven look. See how that looks really woven in there? Same thing over here. Coming over here, doing the aura and the aura, and then once again that woven look coming right in and right in. Isn't that such a beautiful tangle? I just absolutely love it. So go ahead and do yours. I'm going to finish up mine, and then when we come back, we're going to add in another tangle to the piece. So one of my favorite tangles is a tangle called mushroom. And if you've ever turned over a mushroom and looked at it, it has a beautiful, almost like cylinder kind of look to it. And mushroom, it looks like this. So let's put that in here. So this is called mushroom, and we're going to zoom in on it. And let's go ahead and make a circle. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide the space, and then I'm going to start to fill in those cylinders. Now you'll notice that as I go, I'm always touching that same point all the way around. And it starts to give me a blackening inside of the piece. Can you see how it's already gotten this kind of blackened feel to it? So I'm just going to go into the next part and start to retouch into that same area, turning the tile, always retouching into that same area. Next one. Turning the tile to make it work for your hands here. Turning, turning, turning. Super fun. Isn't that beautiful? I love mushrooms. So like if you ever turn over a mushroom now and you see all those little cylinders underneath, it really gives it that really cool feel. So I love it because it really has a sense of whimsy to it, but it also has a very elegant feel to it as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that away and bring back our tangle that we're working on here. And let's go ahead and zoom out on this bad boy. And I'm just going to add a few little mushrooms to go around in the piece. So I think I'm going to start up here, and I'm just going to let them fly around in the piece. So I'm going to come up here and maybe do a larger one over here. I'll come over here and do another one, and maybe a smaller one down here. I'm going to turn the tile and look for another one to do. Maybe I can fit 3 in here. Who knows? Let's see where this goes. I love to play and, feel free with whatever I'm doing in my Zentangle practice. I never want to feel confined. So every time I do this, it's always going to be a little bit different. But that has a nice feel to it. So let's go ahead and start in on this guy right here. So you're going to see me divide the space. And once again, I'm just going to come in. And I'm going to turn my tile. Let's zoom in on that so you can see what I'm up to. Turning, turning, turning. And these are beautiful when they're shaded in. They're so lovely. So you can see that that really gives it a nice sense of whimsy. I'll be able to get one more in there. The smaller ones are always a little bit more challenging for me, but the more you practice, the better you get at it. Come over here, do another one. So you're going to see me start to finish these up, and I want to encourage you to finish yours up, and then when we come back, we're going to work with our border, which will be a lot of fun. So go ahead and finish up yours. I'm going to finish up mine, and then when we come back, we'll do the border. So let's go ahead and start to bring a little bit of gravity into this piece. You know, one of the things that I've been playing with lately is breaking the borders and whatnot. And so you can see that I've got those really fun little mushrooms that are floating around in there. And so I'm going to have to pick up and put down my border around here. So you can see why I left everything penciled in instead of inked in, because it gives me the option of playing. So I'm just going to come in and start to move through the piece. And I'll come down over here. I'm going to turn my tile. Now I'm going to ink in where my aura is and close off that square. And I'll also ink in where that central column is, but I will not connect them to each other. I will keep them separated. So you can see that it brings this really kind of nice interruption into the piece. I'm always looking for ways to do interesting borders, interesting compositions. And I love that interruption there. I think that it just gives such an interesting feel, don't you think? So that when we come back in, look at how pretty that is. It's got such a unique feel to it. All right, so you go ahead and finish up yours. I'm going to finish up mine. And when we come back, we're going to start to do some color, but I want to add one more detail before we do that. Okay, so while we were on our break here just for a moment, I had a little snafu with my recording, and I was adding a little bit of black into this area over here where we have the waves. And the reason for that is that I wanted to give a nice correspondence between the two of these areas in here. Now, if you have a white gel pen, we can go back in later and add some more detailing. If you don't have a white gel pen, this is a great opportunity for you to go and purchase one, and we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But for now, if you want to leave it black, you can absolutely leave it black, and later on, if you want to add some more to it, you can. All right, so let's go ahead and start to add more to this piece by bringing in, you know, my favorite thing, some color. So let's begin by adding some color. I have in my hand here the cobalt turquoise, which is PC 105, and then I also have in my hand the parrot green, which is PC 1006. Now you can tell that I'm all sharpened up here, and the reason for that is when we are working with a large area to bring color into, we want to make sure that we have a lot of lead to work with here. Now remember, each color pencil is three different colors, right? So you have your light, you have your medium, and you have your dark. It's all about the amount of pressure that you put on the pencil. However, if you ever need to add just a little bit of depth to something, you can always grab a color that's darker within the same hue to give it more depth. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started by bringing in some of this beautiful green into this. So I'm going to work with the parrot green first. This is the lighter color, and you can see that I'm going to work on the side of my pencil here, and I'm really just rubbing the pencil against the page and starting to dust. I'm going very, very lightly here. And you can see that working on the side of my pencil, I can get a lot more coverage much more quickly. I'm going to turn the tile to make it work for my hand. And you can see just by the way I'm holding the pencil, look how far back I am on this. So I'm really not doing technical work. I'm doing what we call foundational work. So just getting in there and bringing in that green, turning the tile. Now, once I have that, I've got that nice foundation. Now I'm going to begin to do some shading. And the shading is really going to give this depth. So right now is a great time to take a look at the piece and see how just by adding color it starts to make it pop. But now we're going to start to add our depth. So I'm going to come into these central channels first, and I'm going to push a little bit harder on that pencil, not by much. So we're really just layering color. I'm still working with the original pencil. And you can see that I'm kind of fading up as I move away. Same thing in here, bringing a little bit of that nice depth into this. I'm going to come over here and do the same, so you can see that here's where I'm going to do a little bit of shading in here to get some depth. And same thing right in here. Coming over to the opposite side, same thing right here. And same thing over here. And I had an opportunity here. Can you see it? Here it is. So I got a little overzealous with this, and that's just fine, because anytime you have an opportunity, it's an opportunity to work with what you've got. So I'm going to come in, and you can see that I've got this channel right here. Now I'm going to come in and I'm going to start to just go along the edge of this piece right here. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. So you can see where my opportunity is. But I'm not going to worry about it too much. So now what I can do is when I bring my white into this, I can really give that a paling out. So I'm not going to worry too much. I'm going to come over to the other side and do the same. And right over here and do the same. Now I'll come in towards the center over here, but I'm going to do my shading with the darker color, and you'll see what I mean in a few minutes. So I'm going to pick up my darker color now. You can see I've got that cobalt turquoise in here, and I'm going to go right back to the center where I started. And I'm just going to do a very, very light dusting right along the black line in here. I'll do the same thing up in here. And then I'll come in right over here on the side where I originally was. Same thing up in here. Turning my tile. Look at how the dimension's already starting to make its way through here. Coming in right here with a little bit of that dark blue. And the same thing up in here. Now, remember how I had my little opportunity over here? You're going to see that this is really going to just disappear in a moment. So I'm going to come in right in here and I'm going to give this a little bit of a push right along the black line in here. Same thing over here. I'm going to come over here and do the same. And I'm going to give this just a little bit more emphasis just right here in the top. Okay, so we have this in here. Let's go ahead and grab our white pencil. The white pencil is wonderful for doing blending and really just teasing out the color. So you want to make sure that your white pencil is clean. And I'm going to start in the darkness first on here. So I'm going to come in and you're going to see me start to roll through this top area with that nice dark blue, right? So I'm pulling it up and notice how the pencil is going in a circular motion. That's to help us get that really beautiful mist of color. And as I move up, it's going to start to gain that really beautiful fade out that I'm looking for. I'm going to come back in here and just blur it out a little bit. And look at the difference between here and here. Much more soft in its transition. So I'm going to come up, pull that darker blue up, and then start to pull the lighter blue up and out. Super fun and super easy. Going to come over here and do the same. And then I'll come over to the side. Notice how when I'm on the side, I'm really working with that circular motion. Even though I'm in a narrow space, you can still tease it out. And notice how I'm leaving a little bit of light on the outside. See how there's that beautiful light on the outside? Really gorgeous. I love this tangle for shading. It's just so spectacular. And then I'm going to come over to this side and do the same. So I'm going to tease it out. Leaving some of that white highlight in there. Look at how pretty that is. Now here's that area where I had my little opportunity and it just disappears. You don't even notice it. I'm going to come in over here, start dragging up that color a little bit, pulling it out. Look at how beautiful that is. Isn't that lovely? It's got such a beautiful aqua-like feel to it. Now we're going to start to look at these pieces in here, and I want to give it a little bit of dimension. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down towards the bottom of the piece. I'm working with the darker pencil here, and I'm going to start by just adding a little bit of that darkness right at the bottom. Getting in right over here as well. You'll notice I'm not pushing hard. I'm giving it just a real light touch. Because it's so heavy in pigment, I don't have to add that much. Same thing over here. So I'm just coming in and giving it that softness. And once I've got that, I'm going to pick back up the original parrot green. And I'm going to use it to tease out the color just a little bit. So I've got those two in. Now I'm picking out that parrot green and I'm going to dust. And I'm going to come over to the opposite side and dust. So you'll notice that as I'm traveling up, I'm lightening my hand just a little bit so that it gives it a fade out. And then I'll pick up my white because the white is so wonderful with this color, and I'll start to pull with that darker blue first, and I'll start to drag it up, coming in up here as well, and I'm pulling now that aqua all the way up into the tips. Same thing here, so I'm really getting into the blues. Gonna drag it up, and then I'm dragging up that secondary color. And as I come up towards the top, notice how it fades out and it pops against that background, doesn't it? It really gives it that definition that we're going for. So I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side. You do yours, I'll do mine, and when we come back, we're going to pull this color to the other side of the piece. So many of you have heard me talk about how I like to have color moving from one side of the piece to the opposite. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn this piece, and what we're going to do is we're going to start to work in the background of the other side. So this side, it's the focal point, and this side, it will be the background. And I love this idea of having the two sides almost married to each other, but yet at the same time it's a little bit more subtle. So I'm going to come in once again with that parrot green, and I'm going to lightly dust. So I'm coming in and lightly dusting. Now once I have that, I'm going to turn the tile. Notice how I'm working still on the side of the pencil, and it's really just a soft mist of color. I'm not being overly zealous with it, it's just a dusting. So I'm just getting in there, working around the pieces. Now, once I have that, I'm going to do something that we call a perimeter shade. So in here, we were actually shading all of the little intricacies of the piece. Over here, what we're doing is we're going to be working around the perimeter, giving a frame to this really busy area in here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start to add a little bit of pressure to that original pencil that we were working with. So different shading techniques, which is always really nice to learn. And you can see that I'm still working with the concept of little circular motions. Just getting in there, having some fun, dusting it out. Coming over to the other side, still working with that circular motion, that mist of color. Now that I've got just the foundation for the perimeter shade, I'm going to pick up that cobalt blue. This is the darker blue again, and I'm going to dust it in. And turning, getting right in there. Really hugging the black line in here. And you can already see how that's starting to frame the piece. Remember how chaotic it was before, and now look at how soft it is. And you could do this with any colors that you have. You don't have to just do it with blue. I'm trying to keep my palette a little bit smaller for this particular piece because it has so much energy. I'm going to pick up that white again, and you want to make sure that your white is clean, and I'm going to sharpen mine up a little bit just so that I have a little bit more to work with. And now I'm going to go ahead and start to blend. Remember the idea that I'm teasing out some of that darker blue. So because the blue has a lot of those teal undertones to it, it works really well with the parrot green. A lot of the time when I'm talking with my students, they'll say, well, how do you know what colors to use together? And for me, whenever I'm working with colors, I'm looking for colors that have a relationship with each other. And because the teal had so much green in it, I knew that it would be a good match. And you know, if you're ever working on another tangle and you're thinking to yourself, I want to add color, but I don't know what colors to choose, you know, one of the things that I notice about my Zentangle practice is one Zentangle will teach me about another Zentangle. So I might come back to this Zentangle and say, you know, I love this color combination. I'm going to add it into another piece. And so, you know, if you write down the colors that we use for class today, when you want to experiment with another piece, you can always pull up this color combo and try it out. So that when you look at this now, this has a relationship to this. It's not just chaos of color, it actually has a story it's telling. Go ahead and finish up yours. I'm going to finish up mine, and when we come back, we're going to start to add some more color to this. So when I originally started this piece, I was really thinking about beautiful Asian fabrics and using the colors that they have in the Asian fabrics. And so I'm going to be bringing in two colors that I think are going to just be so gorgeous with this. So I'm going to be working with the beautiful blush pink. I love this color because it has a lot of earth tone in it. You can see that it's not like a hot pink. It's got a lot of earthiness to it. And this is PC928. And then I'm also going to be using the magenta, which is PC930. Now, I kind of feel like the magenta is a little bit of a misnomer because it has a little bit more of a crimson edge to it. So you could use crimson with this, you could use a bright red with this, and it would work as well. So remember, you don't have to use the same exact colors as I'm using. Now I'm going to go ahead with that blush pink first, and I'm going to start to dust in those Flux that we started with. And so I'm going to come in and just lightly dust in the Flux. And you can see that I'm going up into the arcs that we have up here as well. Now, at the bottom of Flux, I'm going to pick up that darker magenta. And I'm going to just lightly dust about halfway up the Flux. And then I'm going to give it an extra press. So I'm giving this a little bit more energy down at the bottom. Now you could go around the edge of your Flux here and go very, very lightly, just giving this a little bit of definition, which is really quite lovely. Now I'm going to pick back up my white pencil. Now you want to make sure that your white pencil is clean as well. So I've just given it a little sharpen up here, and there's no more blue on it. So I'm going to come in from the bottom. I'm going to tease up that magenta just a little bit. I'm looking for a pastel look here, so that is why I've chosen to bring the white in. So you can see that I'm just going up to the edge. And now I'll come in up here and start to blur it out. The key in these tiny spaces is not to go too far. Leave a little bit of white right on the edge so that, look at that, when I bring it up close, hopefully this will stay in focus, it'll really have that highlight to it, which is quite nice. Now, if you want to get a little bit more punchy with that color, you can come back in with just a little bit more of that magenta and just give it a little bit of punch. Look at how pretty that is. So I'm going to do that in each one of my Flux. So go ahead and do yours, and then when we come back, we're going to start to work on some of these outside pieces. All right, so let's go ahead and start to work on the outside edges on the opposite side. So remember the idea of carrying color from one side of the piece to the other? Let's go ahead and flip this. And remember that technique that we used around the outside edge where we were doing a perimeter shade? We're going to do that, but we're going to switch colors. So I'm going to come back in with that pink. And remember, I'm working on the side of the pencil so that I can get as much of that lead to work for me as I can. So I'm just going through and adding that in, turning the piece. And I'm just going to do half of this side so that you can just get the idea of what we're doing here. So you can see that I've dusted in the pink, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with that really beautiful magenta, and I'm going to start to develop that really nice perimeter shade. So I'm dusting in first, going nice and light, always wanting to go light first and then go darker later. I know the tendency is to want to just let her rip, but sometimes you have to go to the light, the medium, and then the dark to get that layering of color that we're looking for. So now I'm going to press a little bit harder right along the black line, turning the tile, coming in, and then I'm going to go ahead and pick back up that white pencil. Now you could come in just for kicks here, you could come in with the pink and tease it out with the pink if you wanted to, and that would be quite lovely. Or you can come in with the white and get that almost pastel-like look with the piece. So it's really up to you how much of the warmth you want to see. So you can tell in the area where I was teasing it out with a little bit of the pink that it got a little warmer. And then on the areas where I'm teasing it out with the white, you can see it's got a cooler feel to it. But look at the difference when you put that really nice perimeter shade on it versus leaving it blank. It really holds the piece, it contains it. All right, go ahead and finish up yours. I'm going to finish up mine, and then when we come back, we'll start to work in the background. Okay, so even if we were to walk away right now, wouldn't that be just a beautiful composition? Super fun. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a third set of colors here. And I'm going to be working with goldenrod, which is one of my favorite colors. It's kind of like a mustard yellow, and it has a really nice earthy tone quality to it. And it's PC1034. Now, if you don't have goldenrod in your collection, don't worry about it. You could always use a Spanish yellow or a Spanish orange to do this particular particular part. And then I also have in my hand the pumpkin orange, which is PC1032. And I love this because it's really got this almost wonderful warmth to it, almost like a latte color. Now, if you don't have the pumpkin orange, you could always try using sienna with your sunburst yellow or your Spanish orange, or you could just use a regular orange. It really doesn't matter. It just as long as it's in the same hue. So what I'm looking for is I'm looking for a yellow and a brown. Okay, so I'm going to come into these really fun Rixty flowers that we have right here. And I'm going to go ahead and start to dust in with the goldenrod first. This is that mustard color. And the reason why I love these earthy tones next to the teals and the really pretty red is because they're all gemstone colors. So it really has a nice relationship. You know, it's almost like a ruby. This is like a sapphire. So I'm really just thinking about those kind of colors. Now I'm going to come in with a little bit of that brown, and I'm going to start to dust right behind where the Rixty is, the triangle. Now once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tease it out a little bit with the goldenrod. And you can see that it really softens out quite nicely. If you want, you can pick up your white. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that my white pencil is clean so that I'm not bringing any blue or red into it. And I can soften it by blurring it out. So you can see that this really gives such a nice feeling to the piece here. So go ahead and finish yours up. I'm going to finish up mine. I'm going to do this one and this one. I'm going to leave these for a little bit later. Look at how fun that is. Isn't that so pretty? I just love the way this piece is flowing. It's got a really nice feel to it. So I'm going to turn the piece around. In typical Zentangle fashion, there is no upside down or right side up. It's just every which way is just fine. You could even have it on its side and it's interesting, the other side and it's interesting. I love Zentangle for that reason. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to take those colors that we used over here and start to bring them on the other side. And let me zoom in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to this one right here, and I've got the goldenrod in my hand here, and I'm going to go ahead and start to dust. And you'll notice that I'm leaving a little bit of a light source inside of this little mushroom here. And I'm going to come in now with some of that brown, and I'm going very lightly. And then when I get out to the edge, I'm going to push a little bit. I'm going to come back in with some of the goldenrod and tease it out a little bit. And you can see that that gives it a lot of dimension. Look at the difference between when you add color and when you leave it in a black and white kind of situation without any color or shading in it. So I'm going to do the same thing in all of these, and I'm going to encourage you to do the same. So go ahead and do yours. I'm going to do mine, and then when we come back, we are going to introduce one more color into the piece here. Have fun, relax, and enjoy. Okay, so look at how beautiful that is. I love these two together. It's got a really nice softness to it, where your eye is bouncing around from side to side and really just giving it a soft, cohesive feel. So we're going to start to add in a little bit of gray to the piece. Now many of you know that I love working with the PC1065. This is the 70% cool gray, and I love it because it doesn't smear or smudge. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I'm good and sharpened up, and we're going to start to work inside of the central channel here. So I'm going to use this nice sharpened lead that we have here, and I'm just going to dust down the sides of our piece. So as I go, I'm just going down the sides. And making sure that there's a really nice softness. I'm going fairly light, coming down the other side as well, and keeping it fairly light in here as well. So I'm really leaving a nice opening in the central channel. You can see that the sides are getting a little depth and the central channel is staying really nice and light. I'm going to come to the black line now, and I'm going to start to give it a medium pressure. So not a heavy pressure, just a medium pressure. Coming over to the opposite side and doing the same. And then I'm going to pick up my white pencil, making sure that there's no color on it, and I'm going to start to tease in some of that gray. Little circles, little circles. What I love about this is that there's no smearing or smudging. You don't have to worry about it. So really nice perimeter shade here on this piece. It's got a really nice softness to it. Now, if you wanted to add more to this to make it more intricate, I'm going to turn it on its side here, and I'm just going to do a little bit of shading right underneath where we have the change in direction. So I have the change here, and I have the change here. And you can see that just by giving that little shadow to it, I'm not, committing to a big shading here. It's just really light. It's easy to overpower a piece with gray. Let's zoom in on this a little bit. I'm going to pick up that white now, and I'm going to dust it out a little bit. Same thing over here. Same thing up in here. Just dusting it out. So pretty. So that when we come back and we zoom out, look at the definition that that brings into the central channel. All right, go ahead and finish up yours. I'm going to finish up mine, and when we come back, we're going to take some of that gray and bring it over here. So let's go ahead and bring some of that gray into the Javik flower here. So I'm going to come in with a little bit of that gray, and I'm going to start to dust in right behind where that beautiful swirl is. So you can see that I'm just dusting behind it. And I'm going to go up into the flower petals about, I'm going to say 3/4 of the way. And you can see that I'm going fairly light. I'm going to give it a little press right behind. Notice how that gray starts to get a glow to it. And I'm going to pick up some of that white now, and I'm going to start to blur out the gray. Just giving it that really soft feel. I love the juxtaposition of gray next to color. It just has a beautiful pop to it. So I'm going to use that very same technique over in here as well. Now for the stem in here, I'm going to use another color, so wait for that. But I'm going to come over in here and really have some fun with these. You go ahead and do yours, I'll finish up mine. Have fun! Okay, so we're going to start to pick up some colors that we had put down just a little bit earlier. I'm going to turn the piece. So you remember when we were working inside of the Rixty flowers, we were using goldenrod and we were also using the pumpkin orange here. I'm going to bring this into the center and let's go ahead and zoom in on this. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to lightly dust. And I'm going to leave about a quarter of this with a little bit of white. Now I'm going to come in and I'm going to press a little bit harder with the goldenrod. And then I'm going to come in with the pumpkin and just do a light dusting again. I'm going to tease out just a little bit of that with the goldenrod. And then I'll pick up the white, making sure that it's clean and blurring out the edges just a little bit. Really beautiful. I hope you like that as much as I do. I might even give that a little bit more intensity. Go ahead and do yours. I'm going to do mine, and then when we finish up, we're going to come into the stems of the Rixty flower. So I've picked back up that parrot green. This is the original green that we had used over in here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use it alone inside of the stems. So what this is going to look like is I'm going to come up towards the top and do a dust. And I'm going to come down to the bottom and do a dust. And then up at the top I'm going to press hard. And down at the bottom I'm going to press hard. And you can see that it gives enough differentiation from the background, but it gives it also a really nice pop inside of the flower. So I'm going to come over here and do the same. And give a little press and a little press. And same thing over here. Now over where we have our Javik flowers here, I'm going to come up halfway and leave a little light on the curve in here, and then I'm going to come in right in here and give it a little press and a little press. Okay, so just moving through those, giving a little press for intensity. And I just love the way those look. It really gives it a nice sheen, doesn't it? All right, go ahead and finish yours up, and when we come back, we're going to do some final touches. Okay, so, whenever I'm finishing up a piece, I always like to look at my lines and see if there's any place where I lost intensity on my lines. And you can see that inside of the central channel, I lost a little bit of intensity in some of these lines when I was putting in the gray. So I can go back in with my micron and just clean it up a little bit so that my lines look really nice and clean. So, you can look around the piece and see, oh, I think I lost the definition here, or I lost it there, and really just kind of clean up the work and really be present with it. Now the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out here, and I'm going to pick up a white pen. For those of you who are new to Zentangle, working with a white gel pen is always a real treat because it can add dimension to a piece where it might not have it. So in my hand I have the Mizu Love pen. This is a really nice pen that I got off of Amazon, but you could also use the Angelic from Signo. This is one of my favorite pens, and you can see it's called the Angelic, and it has a wonderful flow to it as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come inside of where the flower head is on this side, and I'm just going to start the pen on my finger because I always find that it works best. And I'm going to just give a little highlight right inside of the flower here. Really super easy. And then I'm going to flip over the tile, and I'm going to come into the area where we had this really cool Betweed flower. And I'm going to start to add some dots into where the Betweed flower is, just to give it some interest here. I always like to add a little bit of something in there. And you know, if you wanted to, you could put in more dots just to give it a little bit more interest. I always think it's fun to add more or less depending on what you like. And the thing about this is that if you don't like it, you can always blacken it out or try something different. Okay, so we've got that now, and it's all set and ready to go. And what I like to do is I like to just take a moment to be with the piece and let it speak to me a little bit. So take a moment to look at your piece and see if there's anything calling your name. Okay, so this was the perfect situation for me. The dots weren't really working for me, so I decided to go back in with my black pen and went right over the top of them, which is great. You can do that with the gel pen. And I decided that I really liked seeing lines instead of dots. So it's really one of those things where you get to play and have a little bit of fun towards the end of the piece. Now I'm going to come in and I'm going to put my chop into the piece. Your chop is your initial, and I like to hide my chop in the piece so that it doesn't overpower it. So I'm going to come in right here, and I'm going to put in my chop. And that lets me know that I've finished with the piece and that my Zentangle time is coming to a close. So let's take a moment to enjoy what we've created here together. I hope that you've enjoyed this time with me. And if you did enjoy the class, please give us a thumbs up or leave us a nice review. Even better, you can subscribe to the page, and then that way you'll be notified every time I add more classes. And I am planning on adding more classes at a little bit more consistency as we move into the fall season. So I thank you so much for joining us today for this really fun class, and I hope to see you soon. Bye for now.